What's up, everyone out there in YouTube world, Facebook world, social media world, the world? Coming at you with another episode of Joe Biden's rules from the ATF. So, what's going on now? Twitterverse, social media world, everything's all abuzz about the new rule that came out from the Biden administration today, closing the so-called gun show loophole. Now, if you subscribe to this channel and you have anything to do with the Second Amendment community, you know that the term and the phrase and the concept gun show loophole is crap. It's a bullshit term. It doesn't mean anything. It's completely made up in order to scare people in the community who don't know anything about guns. And so Joe Biden has decided he's going to crack down on this gun show loophole with the ATF publishing a brand new rule, another brand new rule without legislature approval coming out today from the ATF. So let's look at this rule real quick. I'm going to give you my thoughts on it and tell you whether you really need to be worried about it or not and what it actually means for the gun community. So, Biden administration finalizes rule to close gun show loophole in effort to combat gun violence. The Biden administration on Thursday moved one step closer to enacting a rule requiring people who sell firearms online and at gun shows to conduct background checks on their potential customers. The finalized rule aims to close what gun control advocates call the gun show loophole by increasing the requirements to obtain a federal firearm license or FFL by more specifically defining what it means to be, quote, engaged in the business of selling firearms. By making the term more definitive, the Justice Department has said it aims to better regulate the market and encourage higher compliance with the federal background check requirement. Under this regulation, it will not matter if guns are sold on the internet, at a gun show, or at a brick and mortar store. If you sell guns predominantly to earn a profit, you must be licensed and you must conduct background checks. I'm not going to read the rest of this article because it's all just fluff after that. But therein lies the critical language. So currently, the rule says that if you are, quote, engaged in the business of selling firearms, you must have an FFL license. Now, the question is, or the issue is, engaged in the business of means anything. It's not specifically defined. So it's been defined over the years by certain case law. People get arrested and charged and file lawsuits, etc., etc. And there's all kinds of a wide variety of opinions on what engaged in the business is. So what they did is they tried to shrink that to this new phrase, which is predominantly to earn a profit. Now, what does all this mean? Well, think about a gun show. If you've ever been to a gun show, every gun show that you go to has two types of people selling guns. It's got the actual FFL dealers who have their signs up, all their inventory, and they sell you guns. And when you buy a gun from them at a gun show, you still have to do a background check. A lot of people think the gun show loophole means you can just go there and buy a gun and nobody has to run a background check, or that's where you can get fully automatic guns without regulations or whatever. That's not what it means. What it basically does is it separates gun sellers into two groups. So when you go to a gun show, you got your regular gun shop, again, with their signs and their inventory, and they have to run you through the 4473 background check to sell you a firearm. And most of the time, you can't leave the show with the firearm either. They either are a local shop and you can come pick it up at the shop, or they have to transfer it to a local shop and you can pick it up from the local shop. The other people selling guns at the gun show loophole they're usually old guys sitting at their table with about 20 to 30 firearms on the table, and they always have a big old cardboard sign that says private collection. And what they're telling people is that I'm not a gun shop selling these guns for profit. This is my private collection that I'm just selling, right? It's basically a garage sale. It's my old stuff. I don't want it anymore. I'm just selling it, and I'm not doing it to make a profit. Now, truth be told, quite frankly, you and I both know those people are running a gun shop. They're not just selling their private collection. Most of them will buy guns from people walking around at the gun show, turn around and put them on their table 10 minutes later and ask for more money than they just paid the guy for walking around on the gun show. That's clearly not their private collection. They are running, in my opinion, an FFL without having an FFL license. So, that's always been illegal, by the way. Again, engaged in the business, you could certainly easily make an argument that that guy is engaged in the business of selling firearms. So if the ATF, as we sat here before this rule came in place, wanted to crack down on those guys, they always could. They can walk into any gun show and arrest all those guys and claim that they're selling them for a profit. Now, this new rule allegedly shrinks the definition from engaged in the business of to predominantly for profit. But in my opinion, as a gun lawyer, that doesn't make it any easier or any harder to prove. It's basically the same kind of language, because what is predominantly for profit? If you make $20, if you make $100, if you make $1,000, if you sell $10,000 worth in a year versus $1,000 in a year, it's still the same, in my opinion, broad definition that nobody knows what the hell it means. And so you could be the old guy at the show selling your guns, whereas before it was, are you selling one gun? Are you selling 10 guns? Now it's just, are you making $10? Are you making $100? How often do you come to the gun show? How many guns do you sell? It's the same amount of evidence that they already needed for the laws that are on the book. So in my personal opinion, I don't think this rule really changes a whole lot as far as changing the law goes. I know some people out there may disagree, and I see all the clickbait headlines on people's YouTube channels and articles and stuff. I don't really think this changes anything, quote, about the law. What I do think this might change, and what I think the point of this rule is on the enforcement side. And I tie this in as an analogy to what's going on with the FFLs. I did a video a couple of months ago about what's happening with FFLs. It used to be back in the day that if you own an FFL and you make some paperwork mistakes, you put some wrong dates on there, you forget a few signatures or something, nothing major like selling to a bunch of convicted felons, but just some generic clerical paperwork mistakes, the ATF would come in and they would say, hey, fix your paperwork mistakes and don't do it again. And that's all that would happen to you. And then Joe Biden passed a rule or executive order that said we're actually going to have zero tolerance now for FFLs. It was always on the regulation of FFLs that if you had one single paperwork mistake, it could cost you your license. So that was always the rule. The practicality was they just weren't enforcing that rule because the ATF didn't want to shut all these people out of business, probably because the government collects a lot of money from them. And so they just weren't strictly enforcing draconian like the rule. And so when Joe Biden changed that rule, you automatically saw people going from slap on the wrist or verbal warning to automatic revocation. Now if you have that one paperwork mistake, they're immediately going for revocation of your license. They always could go for revocation of your license, they just chose not to. I think the same thing is going to happen here. I don't think that this new rule changes the definition of the law. They can still charge you for these things just like they could have before, but you may see it on the enforcement side. Whereas before, if they did catch the old guy, you somehow popped up on the ATF's radar at a gun show, they would just tell you, hey, we got our eye on you, you might want to quit selling these guns, as a warning. And then if they found him selling guns again, then they would have more evidence to say, look, we already told this guy once not to sell guns, and he's still doing it, so he's obviously doing it for profit, or he's engaged in the business of. Now, instead of that warning, what you're going to do is if you pop up on the radar, they're just going to arrest you and charge you. It's basically going to result in a zero tolerance policy for these people, just like there was on the FFLs. So I don't think this rule means that now there's going to be a new contingent of 1,000 ATF agents that are going to start bombarding the gun shows across the country and harassing every old guy with a private sale sign sitting on his table. But if they do end up having one of those old guys or anybody else pop up on their radar, whether it's on the internet or a gun show or whatever, and they think that they're doing it, instead of warning them or instead of maybe just giving them a slack or slap on the wrist or whatever, they're automatically going to go towards prosecution. So that's my take on the rule. If you do these things, look, in my opinion, you're violating the law. If you're buying guns at a gun show for $200 and turning around and selling it at the gun show the next day for $300, you're engaged in the business of selling guns, and you should have an FFL. Now, I don't think there should be FFLs because, as we all know, I'm an absolutist when it comes to the Constitution, and I don't think you should have to have a special license to sell firearms. You should be allowed to sell firearms just like you should be allowed to sell everything else without a special license. But since there is a law that says you have to have an FFL if you're engaged in the business or making a profit predominantly, and you're engaged in the business and you're doing it at a gun show, then you should have an FFL. It's not fair that the FFL guy pays all the taxes and the fees and everything else to be able to do it legally, and you're over here doing it illegally just because you don't want to pay the fees. So that's my take on it. It is another new law out there. It's election season. The border sucks, inflation sucks, Joe Biden sucks, so everything sucks. And so it's just a way for him to try and make it look like he's doing something to win favor with his base, because they're worried about what's happening in Gaza Strip more so than they are about what's happening here at home. So I think it's a political ploy. I'm not super worried about it. It's not going to affect 99% of the people out there. The people that it is going to affect are probably already violating the law anyways. It's currently written, but just so you know, I just want to educate people and know this is out there. So if you're one of these people, just be wary of it. So as always, thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe. Stay safe, stay healthy, stay vigilant, and as always, carry on.